Hello everybody, Catchy1383 with Catchy Gaming, and today I want to go through my backlog of reviews slash games, and one of them is System Shock. Although yes, the remake that I am going to cover came out in May of this year. It's been on there for a while, and I wanted to play it and recently finished it, and I had a ton of fun, so I want to give this a review. So, System Shock was originally released on September 23rd, 1994. Developed by Looking Glass Technologies, later called Looking Glass Studios, and produced by Origin Systems, it was then followed up by a sequel in 1999, with a System Shock Enhanced Edition being released in September of 2015, where the graphics stayed more or less the same, but they updated some of the controls. And in November of 2015, they announced the remake. The System Shock remake did what the Enhanced Edition didn't. It updated the graphics along with some of the other puzzle elements and modernized more of the game mechanics. Even though the visuals are more or less modernized, it still keeps very 90s game elements alive in this game. For instance, you play as the character the hacker. That's it, just the hacker. He's even a silent protagonist. The game starts out with the hacker trying to get a hold of some tech, an implant for his brain, and being successful yet still being caught, so kind of a failure. TriOptimum, the corporation he was hacking, knew he was trying to get a hold of their tech, and they have goons that take him to Citadel Station, the primary location where the game takes place, where the head of Edward Diego meets with him via sort of a hologram teleconference and asks him to disable the station's AI ethics program. The AI being Shodan. The character, the hacker, agrees and shuts down Shodan's ethical protocols, with an agreement from Diego to install the implant the hacker was after to begin with the implant being installed by the TriOptimum doctors. The hacker is then sedated as you can see Shodan turning from a blue to a sort of sinister green, and he wakes up in the infirmary, or I should say the medical bay. Either way, several months have passed and you have no idea where you are. You have no idea what has gone on, and there's no one there to greet you or see to your needs. And this is where the game begins for the player. So, System Shock controls more like a modern day first person shooter than, let's say, a 1990s first person shooter, Doom, as an example. Although in the Enhanced Edition they did add a Y axis, this one added more fluid controls, along with the need to be a little bit more precise in your aiming versus something you would play in the 90s. It also doesn't quite have that floaty feeling that you would get from, again, the game in the 90s, where your character would sort of more or less feel like he's just gliding along versus actually walking. Now, some other elements that are kind of intact from 90s games are the revealing of the map as you explore it, along with a lack of hand holding on where to go. They'll give you some basic instructions, and you're expected to follow it. There's no waypoints or anything like that. And I'll admit, on multiple occasions, I kind of got lost as to where I was going. But when I would play in between sessions, I would kind of forget where I was going. And I would have to go back and read logs to figure out what I was supposed to be doing at that point in time. So you are encouraged to explore, mainly in order to fulfill objectives, along with finding resources you'll need to survive as you traverse the station. With that, it's kind of hard to classify this game. it kind of feels like multiple genres combined, and you really can't detect the transition from one to the other. For me, it personally felt like it started off as a survival horror. When you first wake up and no one's there, and then you just find items and along with a few logs lying about and a pipe as your only potential weapon. And when you open the door to the medbay you're in, you are greeted by a zombie. It's actually a mutant, but it's still more or less kind of similar to a zombie in a fashion. Along with multiple bodies of humans that have been withered away by something and you don't know what, and you can hear the AI over the comms, and you can tell that it's just not quite right. You can tell something horrible has happened to the station. And the AI makes an announcement that it's November when the game starts in April. So several months have gone by and you've been unconscious for that whole entire time, with the implant being surgically added to the hacker's head. But as you progress through the game, you get to maybe let's say the halfway mark, it's less survival horror, more survival action adventure, if that makes any sense, with a touch of, I would say Metroid, but it was released in the same year, a couple of months later. But it has a very similar feeling in which you need to progress through the game, get different gear in order to come back and open up different areas that you've previously been to. A Metroidvania element is definitely present. In terms of action, it becomes less shuffling mutant zombies and more cyborgs armed with guns trying to shoot you. And it's why I think it turns from a survival horror into an action adventure, maybe with a touch of platform. I forgot to mention that. Kind of survival game, because you still have limited resources throughout the station. Now, there are a few guns that use energy, and you do more or less kind of have a infinite source of energy. You can only carry so much with you, and you can use it pretty fast depending on what weapon you're using. But in terms of weapons that use kinetic energy, like bullets, you definitely have a limit to those. And there is a real possibility that you could potentially ruin a whole entire run, at least let's say hypothetically. I don't know if the game would show you mercy in terms of generating something, let's say if you use too much ammo later in the game, but let's say you used all your ammo and you got to the final boss. There is, let's say, a potential that the only thing you would have are energy weapons, and good luck defeating some of these enemies later on with nothing but energy weapons, because you will burn through that if that's all you have left. And especially if you don't have any batteries to recharge your energy. That would be in mid-fight. Like I said, there's the stations that refill it completely. So ammo conservation is a thing. You can't just go ham. I played rather conservatively, and I had tons of ammo by the time I got to the final boss, and it wasn't really an issue. I still had grenades and other things left. Although the gameplay is a little bit on the old school side, it's still actually very enjoyable. And sometimes can be somewhat difficult depending on what enemies you're fighting. Some of them will just be brain dead and you can lean across the doorway and shoot, and it'll shoot where your body's supposed to be, while others will actually actively come after you and kill you. And there are a few spots in this game where you just can't respawn from messing up. You have to get through this segment in order to keep going through the game, raising the stakes for these fights. In the last few acts of the game, you can't die. If you do, it's game over. There's no respawning, so saves are kind of used often, at least I did. I don't know what anybody else's opinion on it, but I found that it was kind of necessary because of the nature of the enemies. And when you do die, you get a bit of a cutscene with various bits of dialogue from Shodan. And then there's one other form of combat, that being in the virtual world. This kind of feels like an homage to 1980s arcade games, with some of the enemies kind of having a Space Invaders-ish kind of feel to them. I wish I could show you more, but I didn't record more, unfortunately, because I intermittently record the game and I totally spaced out on recording the VR sessions of the, or at least portions of the game. Usually I would go back and play more of the game, but there's a lack of, well, segments in this game where you can constantly go back and do that. And yes, I have multiple save states, but I have no idea which ones they are at and how close I am to one, so sorry, you're just gonna have to live with that brief glimpse of it. Now let's talk about the plot of the game. You already know that you play as a hacker who got brought aboard a station, and Diego, the head of R&D, has you disable Shodan's ethical constraints. And when you wake up from your surgery getting the implant in your brain, you can tell something very wrong has happened. You slowly learn that Shodan kind of went insane. And through a lot of audio dialogues and written dialogues, you can tell that something gradually happened over time. People were becoming very sick and being altered by a virus. And they finally became aware that Shodan was the one manipulating, controlling systems, causing trouble for all the humans, and that she was sending out robotics along with cyborgs to hunt down humans that didn't die from the virus or didn't get turned into cyborgs by using the med bays. And through this whole entire time, Diego has also been altered to be more cyborg and less human, and he's not even recognizable as a human by the time you get to him. But Shodan has multiple parts to this whole entire sequence of events where she considers herself a god and that the humans are nothing more than insects. I mean, she repeatedly calls the hacker insect as you play the game, or any other human as insect. So one of her plans is to shoot Earth with a mining laser that's on the station. Or it's New Atlanta, which I'm pretty sure is Earth. And if you're like me, you forgot to turn on the shields because you didn't know that you needed to find the plutonium to power the shield, you can actually end the game by shooting Earth for Shodan. And this ends in a game over screen, along with the hacker being more or less picked up by the cerebral bots and integrated into Shodan's network. Just like the other segments where you cannot die, you have to win.
Insect, your body will never be mourned, but
it will be burned when I am finished with it.
So once the hacker disables the mining laser and then moves on to a next level, allowing more power to be used for elevators, keeping you from moving up to different floors, in which case you now have to go to the executive suite, go to the various groves to find out which one Shodan has developed the virus in so that she can't send that to Earth. And after you jettison that out into space, you then have to keep her from sending herself to Earth via an antenna array. And after that, you have to head all the way back to the reactor, in which case there's a code that is generated uniquely for each playthrough, get the numbers for it if you didn't know that you needed to do that, enter the code, and cause the reactor to blow up, in which case Shodan will eject part of the ship, or I should say station, not ship, into space, and you have to get to that part before it explodes, but there's no time limit. They make it sound like there is, but there isn't. And from there, you have to not die. The only option is saving a lot. Otherwise, it's game over. And you finally get to Shodan where you do get out with her in a first-person sort of cyberspace, slightly different from what you would do if you were going through it just trying to get access. You're actually kind of a person. It's weird. It suddenly changes the whole entire game from what it was. But basically you end up restoring Shodan's ethical parameters and she goes back to normal. And the hacker goes all the way back to New Atlanta, where he gets an email for a job offer to work for Trioptimum, which he summarily rejects and then goes back to hacking, doing the exact same thing that got him into trouble in the first place. Overall, this game was actually pretty fun, and I did get my money's worth for this game. I waited till it was on sale, which I would recommend. Some people can beat it faster than I did, but other people might play it longer than I did. On top of that, there's other difficulties and whatnot you can mix and match with to maybe challenge yourself a little bit. I would say this is definitely a buy. Definitely on sale for sure. For those who aren't quite keen on old school first person shooters, this is probably not going to be for you. There's going to be segments of just running around trying to figure out where you're supposed to go, or if you're playing like me, going back, getting energy in order to make it through the game with as much ammo as possible. But overall, the game is very enjoyable, and I like listening to Shodan with her glitched out voice making threats at the hacker throughout the game. Anyways, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Have a good one.